We begin today at the Mishnah on the top of Daf Ein Tessa Medalef. Zok the Heilige Mishnah. Hoisa oimedes al roish hagag. If she was standing on a rooftop, v'zarkela, and the husband threw the get to her to the roof. So he's standing at the bottom in a courtyard, and he throws up the get to her to the roof. Kivin shegia la'aver hagag. As soon as the get reaches into the airspace of the roof, before it lands, harezu megareshes. She's right away divorced. You don't have to wait until it dropped down onto the roof. Mm-hmm. And that means that even if before it drops down to the roof, it gets burnt or something, dog comes and grabs it and takes it away, but she was already kainit, she's already divorced, so what happens with it afterwards doesn't matter. That's if she's on the top and he's on the bottom.
It's no roof.
Well, we'll see soon in the Gemara about that. But Pashtus, yeah, the roof belongs to her. If the case is the opposite, the husband is standing on the roof and she's standing below in the courtyard, and he throws it into her courtyard below. Again, once the get leaves the place that's over the roof and it goes into the airspace that's in the courtyard, so then even if nimchak or nisrav, even if it got erased, let's say as it's coming down, there's a huge rain that erases the ink of this get, or it gets burnt from a fire that comes, harezu megareshes. She's still divorced because the get already entered into the airspace of her domain. Frag the Gemara, how could you say that in the airspace it gets acquired by her and she's divorced? So the Gemara starts off here. This question is regarding the first case of the Mishnah, when the get was thrown up to the roof and it entered into the airspace of the roof. How could you say she's divorced? But it's not protected there. What does this mean? What happens if a wind comes and it blows the get out of the airspace of the rooftop? So since we see that in the air, a wind could just simply carry it away. So if so, Rashi says, the Gemara's question is that this is what's called a avir she'ein soifil anuach. It's in the airspace where it's not naturally necessarily going to land. A wind can just blow it away. So we had already before in the Gemara, even if you're going to say that you kaina something in the airspace of your chotzer, but not if it's in the airspace where it's not destined to land. So over here, what did the Mishnah say? What happens if it got erased? What happens if it got burnt? Or let's say a dog came and grabbed it. Fine. So then you could say that be'etzem, it's in the airspace that's going to land. But the Gemara's question is, no, it's not only if an external thing comes and happens and can destroy this get. The very fact that it's in the ear means that the ear is blowing it still. It's not stable at all. And if the ear blows it, the ear is going to blow it away. It's not even destined to land b'chlal. So how could you say that she becomes divorced? That's Rashi's pshat in the Gemara's question. There are other Rishonim that learn the pshat in the question. It seems to be more simple in the meaning of the words of the Gemara, that loy mintar, the question is that it's a chatzah she'eina mishtameres. One of the conditions of a chatzah to be kaina is that it has to be guarded, protected in the chatzah. But over here, if it's still in the airspace and the wind could blow it away, so it's not being guarded by the chatzah. Loy mintar, it's not guarded.
And the wind could blow it in this is the gag or the chatzah?
On the gag. Here we're talking about the gag. Soon the Gemara is going to talk about the chatzah. Yeah, we're getting to that. Rav Yudah Mashmul, so Rav Yudah answers the name of Shmuel. Begag sheyesh loy makeh askinan. We're talking over here about a gag, a roof that has a fence around it, and the get is already in between the fence. So therefore, it's going to, even if a wind comes, it's going to land on the roof. So therefore, she's kind of even before it lands on the roof because the fence keeps it in. Ula b'menashi mishmei davimi omar. Ula answered it a little bit differently. Hacha, what we're talking about over here is b'pachais mishloisha samach legag askinan. The get came close enough within 3 tvachim to the rooftop. The chol pachas mishloisha samach legag kegag dami. The rule is anytime you have something which is close enough within 3 tvachim to the ground where it's landing on, or in this case to the rooftop where it's landing on, it's as if it already landed. And therefore, once it's there, and it has this fence around it, without a fence. Okay, according to Ula, there is no fence around it. It's just the height. It has the height of a gag. So Rashi explains the very fact that it has the height of the gag, and it has to be tall, at least 10 tfachim. So the height of 10 tfachim makes it a chotza mishtameres. But then, we had the question, the wind could come and blow it away. But we say no, that since it's close enough to the gag, so it's as if it already landed. The problem of the wind blowing it away is in the airspace, that it's aver. Aver she'ein sofer lenuach, that's a problem. But once it's already close enough to the rooftop, so then it's as if it landed already. Once it's as if it landed, even if the wind would blow it away, it doesn't matter. It already landed and she was already kainit. Right? This halacha is based on the concept of lavut, that it's as if it already landed.
You're saying the walls are 10 and this is 3.
It's two different answers, though. According to the second answer, there's no wall, there's no fence around the roof. The first answer is that there's a fence, and the second answer is you don't need a fence because it came really close enough that it's as if it already landed. Now going to the next second part of the Mishnah, hu milmaila. What happens if the husband's on the roof and he throws the get down into the chutzner? So again, the same question is v'hal loy mintar. The get, when it flies into the airspace of the chutzner, it's not at all protected within that airspace. The get could be blown away from the wind. So that answers the Gemara. So over here the case has to be kagoin shahayu mechitzais hatachtainis oitvais al yanis. The courtyard that's there, that the get is being thrown into, that's near this rooftop, it has very tall walls. The walls are so tall they're actually even higher than the walls the walls or fence that surrounds the rooftop. That it's within the walls of this chutzner. The husband threw the get and it landed. It didn't land yet. It's flying, but it's already within the walls of this chutzner. Let me just finish over here. I'll explain this in a second better. And the Gemara just brings from one more Moira that said this. That the mechitzes of the courtyard is so high that it's even higher than this fence that's around the rooftop. And so Rashi explains what the Gemara here is saying is, first of all, the point over here is the same like the Gemara said before regarding the gag, that the get, there's no issue that the get is going to fly away with the wind because it's already within the walls or within the fence that there is around this chutzner that it's going to land into. But another detail Rashi clarifies, it says here in the Gemara that the mechitza of the courtyard is higher even than the mechitzas of the rooftop. Why does it have to be higher? What would be the problem if it would be on the same level as the gag and the husband threw it and it's already now flying in and it didn't land, but it's within the mechitzas of the tachtainus? Rashi explains because when you throw a get, you're standing on a gag and you're throwing a get, you have to go get over the fence that's on the roof. The get's going to fly higher than that fence of the roof, and then it flies higher, and then it starts going down to the chutzner below. But the Mishnah said that the get, she becomes mugareshes right away as soon as the get flies out of the airspace of the gag, as soon as it flies into the airspace of the chutzner. Now, when it flies into the airspace of the chutzner, because it had to fly over the fence of the gag, so then even if the fence of the chutzner will be the same height as the fence of the roof, it's not yet going to be within the fence of the chutzner. So you have to say that the fence of the chutzner is higher than the gag than the fence on the gag. So even when you had to clear the fence of the gag and you had to fly higher, when it enters into the space of the chutzner, it's already within the height of the higher fence of the chutzner, and therefore she'll be megareshes right away.
Be a little lower also.
Again, what?
It can be lower as long as it goes into the...
Right, but it's mashma from the Mishnah that as soon as it enters into the airspace, right away yakaina. Doesn't give any limitation of how high or how low. That was the other pshat before, but negate to the gag, it says pachas mishloisha. But here, according to this pshat, the Gemara wants to explain that she should be megareshes right away as soon as it enters into the airspace, even when you have to throw it higher.
Yeah, over here it says, by the gag it says shegir the avir gag. So just throwing it up is not enough. It has to be a gear.
Okay.
And over here it says
Kivish yotza mirishus gag. Right. Yeah. So that's why it's explaining that it's eitfais. Very good. Talk to Gemara. Amalei Rababa said to Ula about this halacha that she could become a gereshes by acquiring her get from the airspace itself, even before it lands. Keman, according to whose opinion is this, that you kind in the airspace, Kerebi. It seems like that this is based on Rebbe's opinion regarding Shabbos. The Omar Rebbe says there regarding Shabbos, and the case that Rebbe is talking about over there is an item on Shabbos. So the Isser on Shabbos is not to be Maitzi, Mirishus Yachid, or Rishus Rabim, or Mirishus Rabim, or Rishus Yachid. So over there, Rebbe speaks about a case where a get was thrown from one Rishus Rabim to another Rishus Rabim, and it flew through a Rishus Yachid. Never landed in the Rishus HaYachid, it just flew through the Rishus HaYachid. So Rabbi says that you're going to be chayiv for that. Even though it never landed in the Rishus HaYachid, one of the conditions to be chayiv in the Malacha of Eitzah is, it has to be an akida. You lifted it up from one place, from one Rishus, and then a hanocha. It landed in the other Rishus. But over here, it didn't land in the Rishus HaYachid, it just flew through the Rishus HaYachid. So what Rabbi says, Yechayev, Kluta, the fact that it was absorbed in this Rishus that it flew through, it was absorbed in the airspace, Kimi Shehun Chadamya. It's equivalent to landing on the ground. So therefore Yechayev for it. So over here as well, the fact that we're saying that she's kind of her get in the Avir, even though it didn't land yet, because we say Kluta, the moment that it was absorbed in the airspace, it's as if it landed there, and therefore she acquired the get and she's divorced. That's what it seems like it's based on.
Even it's not high.
Huh?
Even the walls
It's
not
not
high.
over there. Well, no. It is no. We're talking dafka about walls that are high. That's the whole good over here.
It can be kluta, you look at
No, so Taisus here actually says that kluta can be shoncha. If you look in the Gemara in Shabbos, you'll see that that there's two different mandomrim that say the concept of kluta can be shoncha. There's Rabbi Kiva and then there's Rabbi. Rabbi Kiva says kluta can be shoncha without any mechitze, without anything, just the property itself. Rabbi holds kluta can be shoncha. That says there in the Gemara, it says Rabbi holds kluta can be shoncha only if there's a roof above this property that it flew through. But even before the Gemara says there's a roof, according to Rabbi, Kluta K'mishocha, there has to be some kind of enclosure. There has to be a fence, something. So therefore the Gemara is saying, here when we're saying that when it entered within the airspace, within the fence of this Rishus, that you kind of, even before it lands, it's based on Rabbi's opinion that says Kluta when there's a fence around it. Kluta means it's absorbed into this Rishus.
Yeah, but you said before that, because you know it's going to fall down.
And a chanami, but it didn't.
Over here, when it goes from one by Rebbe.
Oh, that's a very good question. The Mefarshim say that the Gemara could have answered that. The Gemara is not going to give your answer. That l'chayda is a very simple difference. We see that Rebbe must have been saying something else, because Rebbe says that it's flying through. It flies through in a way that's not soifei lanuach here, and still Rebbe says yechayev kluta. Here we said that it must be soifei lanuach, so this must be based on a different inyan. There's a much bigger limitation here. And the Chanami, the Gemara could have pointed that out, but it doesn't. The Gemara says something else. Amalei, so Ola answered, no, it's not connected to Rebbe's opinion. Dafka afilatei merabbanan. The halach here could be even according to the Rabbanan. Why? At kan leplig Rabbanan led the Rebbe. Why do Rabbanan argue on Rebbe over there and they say that you potter for the Hitzah elul in your Shabbos? That's only regarding Shabbos. Why? Because by Shabbos, one of the basic conditions of the malach is you need the hanocha. Has to land and there has to be a stability to the landing. So the kluta, according to the Rabbanan, does not qualify as hanocha in this rishos. But over here, you don't need. There's no concept of hanocha. Mishumin turihu. Over here, the get has to come and be in the airspace of the rishos in such a way that it's guarded by this rishos. Once it's within the fence or walls of this chutzner or this gag, it's already guarded over here. So therefore, she could be divorced even in the airspace. The same point Rav Asi explained the name of Rav Yechanan. Going back to what we said before, that the case over here is that the get reached into the mechitzis of the chutzner because the mechitzis of the chutzner were higher than the mechitzis of the roof. And on this, Amalei Rab Zayda Rab Asi. Rab Zayda asked Rab Asi about this. Come on, according to who are you saying this? Kerebi, is this following Dafke Rebbe's opinion? The Omar, Kluta Kemi Shehun Chadamya, that when it gets absorbed into the airspace, it's as if it landed, and that's the basis, that's why she's divorced. Amalei, and he answered the same answer, no, Filatei Rabbanan, even the Rabbanan would agree here. Atkan lepliga Rabbanan led the Rebbe, Elulin Shabbos. The Rabbanan argued on Rebbe only regarding Shabbos. Aval hacha mishumin turehu. Over here, it has to be guarded within the walls. And vaha kaminter. It's already guarded within the walls, even if there's no proper hanacha. The next thing it said in the Mishnah was nimchak. If the get ended up getting erased before it landed, she's still divorced. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Baravua. So Rav Nachman said in the name of Rabba Baravua, Loishanu. This that we said, that before the get lands, she's divorced, so this is only Elisha Nimchak Derech Yiride. If it got erased when the get was already heading downwards into the chutzner. When you throw a get from the roof into the chutzner, so the husband throws it up in order to go over the fence of the roof. So first the get is flying in an upward motion, and then the get starts going downward. Only when the get is on its way down, then I say that it's already heading into this chutzner, and even before it lands, it's already guarded in this chutzner and she's divorced. Avol nimchak derech aliyah. But if when the get was heading upward, in the upward motion, that's when it got erased, then loy. Then it's not going to be divorced. She's not going to be divorced. My time. What's the reason for the difference? Because because in the beginning, at that point when it's still in an upward motion, it's not lemenach. It's not flying in the motion to head to go and land. Only when it's already starting to head downward, then I say that it's as if it already landed. It's as if it's already in the rishus, in the avid of the rishus. But when it's heading up, it's heading in a direction which is still away from the chatzah, going up. So then at that point, it's not yet within the chatzah to be divorced with this. Nisrav, then the Mishnah said, what's if the get got burnt? There was a fire. So then she also will not, she will be divorced if it was already within the avra of the chatzah. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba bar Avua. So leishanu, but this was said, Elo shekodam get ledeleka. This is only if the get that was there, that entered into the airspace of the chatzah, that was flying there before the fire came. And then a fire came and burnt the get. So she'll be divorced. If the fire was already there from before, which means that the get was going to go right from the beginning. It was heading to the fire, then light. And then if the fire burns it won't be divorced. My time, why? Because because from the beginning, where is it heading to? It's heading to the fire. It's heading to a place which is going to be burnt. It's never going to land into the chatzah. It's going to land into a fire.
She's staying up there.
Amar Rav Chisda, sagt die Gemara Rav Chisda said as follows. This is a new halacha here. Rishuyos chalukais begittin. When it comes to a get, so then the domains are divided for a get. Now, what's the point that Rav Chisda is coming to say? This is actually connected to a halacha we learned before. If a husband wants to give a get to his wife and she doesn't have her own property, the husband could lend her a space in his property and say, here, this is a space I'm lending to you that's yours to be kind of you get there. What Rav Chisda is saying though is, if a husband tells his wife, I'm lending you this space in the property, so then it's dafka that particular space. If the get ends up landing in a different space, you're not going to say, oh, he said that space, but he didn't mean dafka that space. It would be any space, even if it lands somewhere else, it's also okay. Says Rav Chisda, no, it doesn't work that way. If the husband says, I'm giving you this space, it's only that space and not a different space. For example, the husband owns one chutzner, a second chutzner, a rooftop, and another few different spaces, it doesn't matter. It's dafka, the space that he told her he's giving her, that's where she will be megareshes. So here the Gemara is going to say that l'chayra our Mishnah is a raya to what Rav Chisda says. From where did the Saba, the elder, Rav Chisda, that was older than them, from where did he know this halacha? We could learn it from our Mishnah. Because the Mishnah says, she was standing on the rooftop. And he threw her the get from the chatzar to the rooftop. As soon as the get arrives into the airspace of the roof, she's right away divorced. So now what is the case here? What are we talking about in the Mishnah? Who owns the chatzar and who owns the rooftop? If the case here is that she owns both of these spaces, both the rooftop is hers and the courtyard is also hers, so then lomali averagak. Why does the Mishnah say that only when the get arrives into the airspace of the rooftop, then she's divorced? The chatzar, the aver of the chatzar is hers as well. Ella, what would you say? What are we talking about? Begag didei v'chatzar didei. Both the rooftop and the chatzar belong to the husband. So she's not divorced from the chatzar. But if so, ki gila aver agag might have it. If the get reaches into the airspace of the rooftop, why should she be divorced? It's all the airspace of the husband's properties. Ella pshita, so it must be. What's the pshat in the ratio of the Mishnah? Begag dida. She's standing on her rooftop, it belongs to her. And the chatzar didei, and the husband standing at the bottom in his courtyard that belongs to him. And therefore it says, only when it reaches into the airspace of the rooftop is she divorced. But now if so, what does it say in the Sefer of the Mishnah? Humul Maila, here the case is the opposite. The husband standing on the rooftop. And Vihi Mulmata, and she's standing below in the courtyard. V'zarkela, and he threw it up, and he threw it down to her, that is, into the courtyard. As soon as it leaves from the rishos of the rooftop, and then nimchak or nisraf, it got erased or burned, because it was already in the airspace of the chatzah, she's right away divorced. Now the Gemara now assumes that the ownership of the rooftop and the courtyard in the Sefer is the same as the Reisha. So what did we establish? If, as we established before in the Reisha, that the rooftop belongs to her, the Chatzah Didei, and the courtyard belongs to him, Why would she be divorced when the get reaches into the airspace of the courtyard? It belongs to him, like the case in the Reisha. So here the Gemara comes and says, if so, in order to explain that the case of the Reisha and the case of the Sefer are similar, we would have to say as follows: Begag didei v'chotzer dida. You're going to have to say, before the Gemara comes to the conclusion, this is part of the question. The Gemara says over here, it seems like you have to say that the case of the Sefer is the opposite of the Reisha. Begag didei, that the rooftop belongs to him, and the chatzah dida, and the chatzah belongs to her. So therefore, when the get reaches into the airspace of the chatzah, she's divorced. But the question is, Reisha, the gag dida, the chatzah dida, does that mean that the cases of ownership here in the Reisha and the Sefer are the opposite? In the Reisha, it's gag dida, it's her rooftop, the chatzah dida, and it's his courtyard. And in the Sefer, it's the opposite, begag dida, the chatzah dida, it's in his courtyard, his rooftop and her courtyard. So the Gemara doesn't want to accept that at this point. Why should we say that it's opposite cases? So in order to make it similar, in order to explain how the Reisha and the Sefer are similar cases, what would we say? The Oishla Makaim, that the case here is that it all belongs to the husband. The rooftop, the chatzah, it all belongs to the husband. Elamai, he throws her the get. Obviously, the direction where he's throwing her the get is the place where he lent her a space to be kind of that get. The Oishla Makim, he lent her a space. Right? So if he's standing on the rooftop and he's throwing the get into the chatzah, so where did he lend her the space? The chatzah. If he's standing in the chatzah and he's throwing it up to her to the rooftop, he lent her a space in the gag. So therefore, what our Mishnah is saying is that the chad makim moishli inchi. So from here we see that a person that tells his wife, "I want you to have a space to be kind of your get in my domain," he only means that one particular place that he's throwing the get in that direction to. But terei is like moishli inchi. But he doesn't have in mind that she should be able to be kind of the get in another place. He's very particular about this, and that's what our Mishnah is saying. You may think once the husband expressed his will to give her a space, so even if he threw it towards the courtyard, it didn't end up yet in the courtyard, it's still in the airspace of the gag, maybe she should be kind of there as well, because the husband wanted to give her a space. So if it's not going to be a space in the courtyard, let it be a space on the rooftop. So we say no. If he threw it towards the courtyard, he dafka meant to give her a space in the courtyard. If he threw it towards the rooftop, he dafka meant to give her a space on the rooftop. So this is a raya to the point that Rav Chisda said that where the person is moishel, the makaim, he meant after that. So the Gemara says, no, that does not have to be the pshat in the Mishnah. Amalei, so he answered him, there's no raya from our Mishnah. Midi area, is this a raya? Dilme, the whole question we had, that it seems like the ownership of the courtyard and the rooftop in the Reisha and the Sefer is not the same. That's not a problem. Each case is according to what that case is. Reisha, begagdi da v'chatzati day. In the Reisha, because the get is being thrown up to the rooftop where she is, over there the case must be that she's the owner of the rooftop. And Sefer, begagdi day v'chatzati da. And in the Sefer, where she's standing in the courtyard, so it must be that the rooftop is his and the courtyard is hers. There's no problem in the Reisha and the Sefer being different ownership. It's based on where she's standing. So it's obvious. That's the pshat in the Mishnah. So there's no problem in the first place.
Why want to make it the both cases are the same?
Because b'derech klal, Reisha and the Sefer, the case is the same. So the Gemara thought over here as well that it's better to say that the Reisha and the Sefer is the same kind of a case. Amar Rava said, and this is based partially on the halachas that we learned here before. Shalish midas begittin. There are three halachas regarding a get. And basically all three halachas are going to point out how the domain of a get is different than it is by a Shabbos. First is what we mentioned before. Ha da'amar Rebbe. This that Rebbe said, Kluta kemisha honcha. That when you throw, like I mentioned before, you throw an item from one Rishus Harabim to another Rishus Harabim and it flies through a Rishus Yachid. So Rebbe says, just flying through is absorbed and it's as if it landed there. And therefore you're chayav for this. Upligi Rabbanan Alen, Rabbanan argue on this by Shabbos, but Hani Milu Linyan Shabbos. By Shabbos, Rabbanan argue. Aval Hacha Mishum Inturi, over here by a get, it doesn't have to land. You don't need a Hanocha. It just has to be guarded within this domain. As long as it's within the fence or the walls of this Rishus that's already guarded there and she's divorced. And the Rabbanan agreed to it. It fly. No. Over here we're talking about a get. We're saying that a get is different than Shabbos. By a get, as soon as it's in the walls or within the fence of this Rishos, it's guarded there and she's divorced. And another halacha Rav says, Rav Chisda says regarding Shabbos, not kana b'rishus yachid. You stick a kana, a reed or a pole into a rishus yachid, u'b'roishay trasko. So it could be a very high pole. and on top of this pole there's a basket. And v'zorak, he threw an item from the Reshus Harabim, v'noch al gabav, and it lands in the basket that's on top of this pole. So this pole could be, let's say, 100 feet tall, and it lands into this basket. Afilu, or the Gemara expels out. Afilu gevaya meya ama. Even if it's 100 amas tall, chayiv. If it lands into this basket, you're going to be chayiv. That's by Shabbos. What's the reason? The rule is that the Reshus HaYachid extends all the way up to the sky. There's no limitation to how high Reshus HaYachid goes. In the Reshus Harabim, if you remember, is only until 10 Tvachim, not higher. But by Reshus HaYachid, it goes all the way up to the Rekiya. Rava says here, this is all true regarding Shabbos. But over here, if a husband throws a get to his wife's domain, and where does it land? It lands in this basket that's very high up there on top of this pole. Over here, she won't be divorced with this because Mishomin Turihu. Over here, she could be kind of the get in her chatzar by the chatzar being a chatzar mishtameres. It has to be in a place, not in the mishtameres, it has to also be avish, a seifil anuach, that it's going to end up landing there. But v'ha'al eminter. Over here, it's not guarded over there. Over here, the wind is going to come and it's going to blow it, and it's not going to be guarded here in this reshus. So therefore, she's not going to be divorced with this. The third point that Rava said, this that Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, Lo yamid adam begag zeh. A person should not be standing on one rooftop. So here what it's talking about is, you have houses that are built attached, and the roofs are attached to each other. And the houses below are owned by two different people. So what's the halacha in Shabbos? That there's a din of a ruv chatzeris within the houses inside this roof that's below the roof. They can't carry from one house to another unless they make a proper area of chatzeris. Right? So over here, what's with the rooftop? If you have rain water that's lying on the top of one rooftop, are you allowed to carry that rainwater from one rooftop to another? Do I apply the halacha of eruv chatzeris on the rooftop just like it is on the bottom? So Shmuel said, yes, it does. Lo yamed adam begag zeh. You should not stand on one rooftop and v'yiklet meg shamim, and gather and take the rain from migag chaveda, from the rooftop of your friend, which is from another roof that's attached to your roof. Why? Even though you may say inside the houses over there they're separated, everyone has their privacy and their place where they live. So over there, the Chacham will guys that you can't carry from one place to another. But on the rooftop over here, they're not living there b'chlal. So over here, maybe I consider the entire rooftop to be all one and the same, even though it's owned by two different people. So Shmuel explained that we say as follows: just like below in the house itself, so the dwellings are disconnected. So too we say that on the rooftop above we consider it to be separated, and the takan of Chazal that you can't carry from one to another applies as well. That's what Shmuel said. Now, Hanemili, when is this true? L'nei Shabbos. Over here we say that what's below applies above on the rooftop as well. Aval inyan get, but when it comes to a get, so mishum kipeiduhu, and here regarding a get, what this is talking about is a little bit of a different case. By get, it's not talking about a situation where the two rooftops here are owned by two different people. But inyan get, the Gemara means to say, if the husband owns these two houses, and then there's the rooftop of both of these houses that the husband owns. So what happened if the husband told his wife, I'm giving you a space, I'm lending you a space in one rooftop to be kind of your get. And he throws her the get. And the get flies up and it doesn't land on that space, it lands on the rooftop of the other house that's attached to it. It lands in a different space. So over here, the question is, should I say that because these rooftops are really all connected, there's no real dwelling where it's distinct and separated from one from another, so therefore even though he told her that he's giving her the space in this rooftop, but if it landed on another rooftop, it's the same thing, it's all on the same roof. Maybe inside in the house over there it's proper dwellings and there's a real wall that separates one dwelling from another. There I would say that if it landed in one space, then it's not the space that the husband gave her, then it's not good. But maybe on the rooftop it should all be the same thing. So here, the Gemara says that's actually the halacha, right? That it's different than Shabbos. Again, by Shabbos we say that the rooftops are disconnected from each other, even though there's no wall that separates them, but nevertheless, just like it's disconnected below, so too on the top we consider it to be separated from each other, so you can't take water from one to another. But But when it comes to a get, what's the reason why? If the get would land in a space that's not exactly where the husband said that she should be kainit, it's only because the husband is particular about this. But v'kula hayla kaptiyenchi. To this point, to this degree, a person is not so makbid. If it's on a rooftop, it's all considered to be one rooftop. And if he says he's giving her a space in the rooftop, even if it lands in another section of the rooftop and on top of another house that he owns, still she'll be divorced. That's a pshat in the Gemara over here, according to most Rishonim. Okay, Omar Abaye said another halacha here. If you have two courtyards and one is within the other, so you have the outer courtyard and all four sides is owned by one individual, and then you have the inner courtyard that's owned by someone else. Now, Pnimi Shalah, the case over here is she owns the inner courtyard, and the husband owns the outer courtyard. Now, the walls or the fence of the outer courtyard, it's taller than the fence of the inner courtyard. The husband throws the get. The husband is standing in his courtyard, on the outside courtyard, and he throws the get into the inside courtyard. That's her property. As soon as the get enters within the airspace of the inner courtyard, but it's still high up in the air, that it's not within the fence of the inner courtyard. It's within the fence of the outer courtyard, which is taller. So again, it's above the ground of the inner courtyard, but it's tall enough. The get is still flying high enough that it hasn't yet landed, or flown down low enough that it's within the walls of the inner courtyard. It's only within the walls of the outer courtyard. So then the halacha will still be harezim ugereshes. She's divorced. Even though before we said that in order for her to be divorced, it has to be within the fences of that courtyard that it's landing in. But over here, the fact that it's within the fences of the outer courtyard is enough that it should be guarded and protected in the inner courtyard, and she's divorced. My time, what's the reason for this? Pnim is gufa, because the inner courtyard, is kamintada. Even though its own fences are lower, but it also is guarded by the outer fences as well. And Rashi here, Rashi uses interesting lashon. Rashi says that the outer courtyard that has its fences are meshubed. It's there, and this is the purpose that it's there for. It also serves the purpose of protecting what's there in that level of the airspace in the inner courtyard. And even when it's so high, but it's still the outer fences are protecting it there in the inner courtyard, and therefore she's going to be divorced. But this is not going to be the halacha when it comes to two boxes or two baskets. If you have a similar case, if you have two boxes or two baskets, and one is inside the other. The inside basket belongs to her, and the outside basket belongs to him. And he threw the get towards her, the inner basket that belongs to her. So then, in this case, even after the get reaches within the airspace of the inner basket, and Rashi's opinion here is, that means even if it already entered within the walls of the inner basket, not only it reached into the airspace of the inner basket, which would be already within the walls of the outer basket, just like the case of the courtyard. The outer courtyard had higher walls. Over here the case was that the outer basket has higher walls, and the inner basket or the inner box is smaller and lower. So Rashi says not only if it reaches within the inner basket, which is already enclosed by the outer basket's wall, but even if it already is within the walls of the inner basket, still she's not gonna be divorced. Eina mugaresha, she's not divorced. My time, why not? The hal loy noch, because it did not land yet. And Rashi explains a basket is different than a courtyard. In a courtyard, there's a halacha that you kaina in the courtyard, not only on the ground of the courtyard, but in the aver, in the space as well. Because the airspace is part of the domain of this courtyard. But a basket is made to place things inside of it. A basket, it's not made to use the airspace of it. It's made to have it noch in it. That's how you kaina something in it. So it has to be dafke mamish noch inside this inner basket in order for her to become divorced. The Arishainu disagree with Rashi and say that you are kaina in the basket, in the inner basket, even before it lands. What the Gemara means to say is, in continuation to what it said before, if it came into the airspace of the inner basket and it's already surrounded by the walls of the outer basket, which are higher, but it's not yet within the walls of the inner basket, then it's not going to be kaina. That's how other Rishonim learn this Gemara. The Gemara asked, but there's a question about this regarding these two baskets. Even if it does land in the inner basket, why should she be divorced? This goes back to a discussion we had before. This is Kelo of Shalikeach B'Rishus Meicheru. Here you have a vessel of the Lekeach, of the wife, which is acquiring this get, and it's in the Rishus of the basket of the husband, and he's the Meiche is giving her the get. And there's an opinion that says that in such a case, you're not kaina at all. So how does that help in a basket? And says the Gemara, Hacha b'mayaskinon, the case that it said over here, it's halacha that Abaye said was, Bekupa she'en lo shulayim. These two baskets, it's not really baskets. The husband has sort of a basket, but it has no bottom. It just has the walls of the basket, or a box, but it has no bottom. And then inside that, you have the wife's basket. So her basket is not inside his keli, because his keli has no bottom. It's just within, just like two courtyards, an outer courtyard and an inner courtyard. So too, these two baskets, you have the outer basket with no bottom, and then her basket inside, which is not inside his basket. So therefore, if it lands, she will be divorced. Beis Shammai say, and this is a completely different halacha. Here we're sort of moving on a little bit to a different subject, discussing a get that was written that wasn't used right away. We had this halacha quoted a few times before. Beis Shammai say, Poiter Adam Ishtay beget Yashan. A person can divorce his wife even with an old get. Now, what does an old get mean? So we'll see in the Gemara. The Gemara will explain what this old get is. But the point basically is the get was written and it wasn't used right away. And even after the get, here the Mishnah itself will say what the get Yashan is. Okay, let's just read on. Or Beis Hillel Oisr. Beis Hillel say, no, you can't use an old get. Now, Veizel get Yashan. What's an old get? If after the get was written and it wasn't given to her right away, he wasn't privately with her, he was secluded with her. After the get was written. So such a get can't be used. So the Gemara explains why not. What's the machlekes here? So that is, what's the basis of this machlekes? Beis Shammai's opinion is, Lo yamrinon, we do not say gzeire shemiyoimru gita kaidin lufna, that there would be a gzeire that Chacham should decree, and there's a problem here that in the future people may say that this child that was born after she already got her get, because people are going to see the date on the get, and then they see the age of the child, and the get was written and it was only used 5 years later, so it's going to look like to people that the child was born after they were divorced already. But really what happened? The get was written on that date, but it wasn't given until a much later date. So therefore people are going to come and say that this child was born from an inappropriate relationship. We don't want people to say this, but Beis Shammai say, we're not concerned that people are going to say this. We don't make such a gezerah. Beis Hillel Savri, but Beis Hillel say, Amrina, we say, Gzeire, Shem Yomru Gita, Kaidin Luvno. People may say, that look at the date of the get, look at the age of the child. This child was born after the get was given already. Amar Rababa Mashmul, Rababa said in the name of Shmuel, that even though there is this Gzeire, we pass on like Beis Hillel, but nevertheless, Imnisis Loitetze. Once she already got married to someone else, so then we allow her to stay married. She doesn't have to leave her new husband. Others say that he said even more than this. Amar Rababa Mashmul, in this garsha, even though Beis Hillel said that you shouldn't use a get yashan, but if it was already used, she was divorced with this get, so then she doesn't need to get a second get. She can go and get married to someone else. The whole gzeira was you shouldn't use this get, but if it was used, then she doesn't have to have a second get.